Guess what? We have the pillow block yoke assembly off the 5 1/4 bud that we took off, had it taken down. They were trying to figure out what in the world did Big Bud do, and finally got it figured out. So here's the pillow block for the center of the tractor. Here's the yoke. This part here goes to the center, or like the divider box. We'll get down that road. But what I have to do, and it's going to require some machining, is this block is a smaller block versus it's a monster. This thing is a monster. They could not find a block to match that. But they had this. And I told them, just get me the parts. I will figure it out because we need this to happen. So then they got me this unit. So I put this together. I pressed it down a little ways so that way we have threads showing. There's plenty of room for your washer and your nut to make sure that you have the distance to lock it. And what I have to figure out, and this is where it's going to get a little tricky, is the diameter of this is bigger than these steps that they have on here. So what I'm going to do is I got to cut this ridge back here, got to cut it back, cut it down so it fits inside of here, and then I got to cut this one back a little ways, the same thing to fit on the other side. And then I found a fairly heavy pipe that fits almost perfectly on the inside of this, and that will be between the two steps, so that way we have plenty of surface to give that bearing support. And it's probably overkill, but I'm just going to do it anyways. So I got to chuck this up in the lathe, my friend over here, and I've got some measuring and some other things to take care of, and I want to get this right because it took a long time to get these components, and if I screw up, that's going to be a bad day. So I'm going to plan it through, make sure I got it all figured out, and then after I got it figured out, we'll put it on the lathe, cut it down, and go from there. But it's almost lunchtime, so I'm going to plan this through, go get some lunch, and then come back and let's tackle this thing and make it happen. I'm not a machinist. I didn't go to school. Everything that I do is basically self-taught, and you learn as you go. So if there's a will, there's a way. I'll make this happen. I usually tend to get that figured out. So, all right, let's think this through. There we have it. The first step is done. Now I got to cut my ledge over here on this side and then make that sleeve that goes over it. There we have it. I think it's cut down the way I want. Now a lot of you guys are going to say, well, you're taking away the structure of this yoke, and you're correct. I am taking a little bit of structure away from it, but to justify what I'm doing, this yoke that's been on this big bud, or the other big bud, for all these years has not failed. And they have machined the same thing that I did. There's no shoulder there. They cut it down like what I did. So I'm copying them, and if it worked, I'm going to do the same thing, and I don't think it's going to be a problem. So this gap here will fit that. The inside diameter will fit this shoulder right here, and that one. So when those two come together and compress, it will sandwich it tight, and it will not move. Now, I'm still on the fence, and I talked about putting a sleeve right here in the center, and the reason why I talked about putting a sleeve is then it gives a little structure in the center of these bearings, because you're going to have the bearings riding on the center, and when you're turning side to side, will that crack anything? Will it break anything without having a little bit of support in the center of that? I don't know. Probably not, but if I'm thinking about it, I probably should just do it. It's going to take a little bit more machining, but I will cut down these just a tiny bit to make sure that these are trued up and the same. And then I'll cut a piece of pipe that'll be just shy of this gap. And the reason why I'm not going to make it exactly tight is I want to make sure that this yoke, when you tighten it up, I want to make sure it sandwiches this bearing. And if I make that sleeve to fill this gap in, and you put this together, it's going to tighten up on that sleeve and not on this. So that's my plan. I think I just better do it. I better just put a sleeve right here. So I'm going to slightly trim those down just a tiny bit, make sure that they're true, and then go from there. All right, got the sleeve, it goes over that, and it goes in there. Now, these splines are really, really tight, so I'm gonna use the press to press this on, and I think we're good to go after I get it pressed on. Oh, beautiful. Love it. I say that a lot because I don't like screw-ups. And that right there, I think, is bomb diggity. So, I need to grab the washer and the nut. Make sure that calculations and figuring and measuring and all the good stuff lines up the way it should. Ooh. Ooh. I think it's going to be perfect. Now that I got that together, I have to figure out where it needs to be placed. It's a shame that we couldn't find the same pillow block because the bolts and everything would have been matched up, but I have to take those bolts out and I have to put that big cast bearing on top of that and measure, get it lined up where I need to, and then once I get it ready and figured out where I want it, then I can measure how much of a tube I need to cut to reach the front axle. We're getting there. We're getting there. A lot of work. I keep saying that because it is.
All right, let's talk about today's video sponsor, and that is Brunt. Brunt makes some amazing work gear. And this boot I've been wearing for 6 months, and I've been putting them through the paces, whether it's hot, cold, wet, oily, muddy. I put my boots through the ringer. These are the Marins with the composite toe, and they are the best boots I've ever worn on this farm. So they've been stained a little bit. You can definitely see there's a little bit of leather poking up here and there. Bottom line is, my feet have been extremely comfortable in these. They've held up very well for 6 months of very intense use. Now I also do have a pair of the Baltics. These have the composite toe as well. I found that these are great for the moments where I just need a quick boot real quick, throw it on. Brunt's come in a number of options. You can get ones that are waterproof with reinforced composite toes. They're patented Brunt toe and heel guards, nano composite safety toe, fully waterproof build, electrical hazard rated, slip and oil resistant, up to 572 degrees Fahrenheit heat resistant sole. Brunt boots also come with this amazingly thick sole, this foam. Very comfortable. So if you need to replace your boots because they're wore out and they weren't built very well, or you just want new boots, or you actually do want to work in your work boots like work boots are meant for, go to bruntworkwear.com or go to the link in the description below and pick out one for yourself. Lots of options and choices, sizes. Good stuff.
This tube right here, it's some heavy tube. Yeah, it's heavy. And that's what we want. That there's the tube that I gotta cut to go from the front axle. Let me just show you. There's the axle yoke. I had to get a special U-joint to match that style to that style, which then will go on to this right here. Okay, so then I gotta have a tube from here over to this point, right there. So what I figured, from this shoulder to this shoulder right here is 27.5 inches. That's with the yoke installed to there. Now, you're also probably wondering, there's no slip yoke in between if I just put a solid tube, and you are absolutely correct. These axles are designed where this yoke here slips in and out of that splines, which means this is the slip yoke. So what I'm planning on doing is I'm planning on doing 1/2 inch, so I'll pull this out a 1/2 inch, and that'll give me a little bit of play back and forth. So some reason this axle shifts a little bit, or this up here shifts a little bit, or metals just constrict and contract and all that kind of stuff, it'll give it the play that it needs to find that happy medium, okay? So I'm thinking a 1/2 inch would be perfectly fine, which means I need to cut the tube from here to there at 27. 27 inches is my golden number. I could go a little bit less than that, but then what I run into is there's not as many splines on this yoke here. I want to try to get as many splines as possible to make sure that that doesn't, well, it's got a lot of surface area to run. So yeah, now that that's figured out, let's crawl underneath here, or crawl out from underneath here. I'll grab the tape measure, and luckily for me, I mean, it kind of major inconvenience. I had to buy a whole tube. I didn't really want to buy a whole tube, but there wasn't any pieces that I could get that were short enough that'll work. So at least the places that I contacted. But this tube here gives me enough, so if I screw up one cut, I got a spare to try to do it again and make it correct. I don't think I'm going to mess it up. I think I got it pretty well figured out. So I'll take 27 inches, mark it, and cut it off. And then I'll install that yoke, and then I got to get it lined up with the other one and install the other one, and then I'll put it up underneath there and see how well it looks, and then I got to balance it. Big tube. Now, while that's cutting it, I noticed one thing that, nothing I did, but this yoke here, that's a weld-on yoke, see that little hole that's drilled right there? Whoever machined this did not get that center. I was looking at it from the top and I was like, man, it just seems weird. And you guys are probably wondering, well, what is that hole for? That right there is so that when you balance the drive shaft, you can put it in a live center and get it, well, trued up. So what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to take it, put it in the lathe, and I'll try to center a new hole so that way I can get it trued up, because that I don't like that one bit. I think that's a poor machining screw up. I mean, it could have been somebody had a bad day and they just drilled it, or maybe a machine got out of whack and didn't really catch that, and I just threw this in a box and sent it my way. So that being said, I'll true it up and get it fixed. But yeah, man, that's a heavy tube. You guys are probably wondering, what is the diameter of this tube, by the way? And I think, is it 4.5? Yeah. So we're 4.5 inch tube. If this thing twists, we either had a really good day and we were able to apply a lot of power to the ground, or it's a really bad day. I'm gonna say it's a really bad day. Can you guys see how bad that is? It's really off. So let's go ahead and just slowly make a new one next to it, where it's supposed to be. That's more like it. Now you guys are probably like, there's a hole in it. Well, there was a hole before. I plan to weld that shut after I'm done balancing the drive shaft and making sure it's all done. But I think that's good to go right there. So next step is I gotta heat this tube up and I gotta put that in right there. Oh, I'm getting tired. Standing here a while machining these pieces. That's okay. It's okay. I do kind of enjoy it. I thought I was gonna have to tap that thing in there. So what I did here is every tube usually has a weld seam and you can tell where they're at by just the color. So I looked on the inside. This one here doesn't have a ridge on the inside where the weld is going through. And so I found that and I took a little grinder and barely ground right there, and then I went on the other side and ground it. So now I have a perfectly straight line down the tube. So I got a mark there and a mark there, and then when I get that to cool, then I'll grab the other one and I'll figure out where those two yolks need to be, and that mark is my center for the other yoke. And then I can heat it up and put it on and then balance it. So one of the things I'm going to do here, I think it's going to work out pretty good. This is actually flush with the floor, and so is the pillow block. And so now that I know that this is flush, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center, I'm going to mark it here, so then I know exactly where this mark needs to go on that tube. I think it's going to work out pretty good. I just got to find the center of it. Right about. Okay. That's where it needs to go. Right there. That's pretty centered. I'm not worried about it being off. All I'm worried about is the tube being not true, where it can wobble this way if these aren't. So, but I'm gonna let it cool down, so then tomorrow I'll try to balance it and make sure I get it get it true, and then see if that length will work underneath the tractor. And then we have a front drive shaft. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is what I'm talking about. It's not perfectly true. Just from the naked eye, I can see right now that this isn't centered, or it's not where it should be. This one's not far off, but I'm still gonna have to tweak on them. The best way for me to do this, and it's gonna be a little inconvenience, is I don't wanna be beating on this on the lathe with this live center and this to try to get it centered. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'll find the high spots, mark them, take it, put it on the floor with a block of wood, and tap it on there. And then I'll put it back in, and I'm just gonna have to repeat this process because I don't want to be messing up that bearing. I don't want to be tweaking anything because this is basically true. I don't want to do that. So this process is just going to be a little inconvenience, but here you go. I can definitely tell it's off. But this part here is true because I made sure that it's centered. That's not the problem. So yeah, other than that, I think this is going to work out really well to center it up. And obviously, as you can tell, those two marks line up. and those line up just fine. That's kind of cool, actually. So I tried taking this thing on the ground, and I tried taking a hammer with a couple blocks and beating on it to get it straight. It didn't even budge, didn't even move. So what I have to do, and I tried it on this one, and it worked really well, is I heated it up, and then I used my my lathe, pushed against it, kept a little bit of pressure, and then I tapped over on that side, and then I tried spinning it and see if it'll touch this, and actually it's almost spot on. So I'm gonna do the same thing in the front here. It doesn't have to move much, it's very, very close, but what I'm gonna do, take the torch, heat it, and rotate it, and then I'll find the high spot, which I already found, and then we'll adjust it.